What if the most devastating thing you could do to a narcissist isn't confrontation, revenge, or even walking away? What if it's simply becoming someone they can no longer distort, manipulate, or define? This isn't about drama or emotional warfare. It's about something much deeper, something Carl Jung spent decades uncovering in the hidden layers of the human mind. What he found wasn't just theory. It was a roadmap to psychological freedom that quietly dismantles narcissistic control without ever playing their game. Jung didn't use the word narcissist like we do today, but he understood this type perfectly. He called it the inflated ego, someone so disconnected from their real self that they can only survive by feeding off other people's energy. To Jung, this wasn't just a personality disorder. It was a spiritual crisis, a soul that mistook its mask for its face. The core revelation. Here's what most people miss completely. The narcissist doesn't fear your anger. They expect it. They thrive on it. What they cannot tolerate, what truly shakes their fragile inner world, is your peace, your silence, your unshakable presence in your own truth. When you stop reacting, when you withdraw not just physically but psychologically, you disrupt the entire mechanism that keeps them functioning. You stop being their mirror, and without a mirror, their performance collapses. Jung described the human mind as a self-regulating system, always moving toward balance and wholeness. He called this individuation, the journey of becoming who you truly are, beyond roles and defenses. The narcissist doesn't just avoid this process, they wage war against it, both in themselves and in anyone close to them. Why? Because your growth threatens their stagnation. Your self-awareness exposes their blindness. Your inner authority undermines their false power. Understanding projection. When Jung spoke of the shadow, he meant the parts of ourselves we disown, the pain, fear, shame, and vulnerability we refuse to acknowledge. Healthy people integrate their shadow and make peace with it. The narcissist projects it instead. They see their own repressed weakness, insecurity, and cruelty in you. They accuse you of being selfish, manipulative, unstable, everything they refuse to admit about themselves. This isn't random. It's psychological survival. By pushing their inner darkness onto you, they preserve the illusion of their superiority. But here's the turning point. The moment you stop believing their projection, their entire story begins to unravel. You don't have to argue or prove anything. You simply hold your ground in your own truth. That quiet certainty creates a rupture in their world. For the first time, their accusations fall into silence. Their provocations meet stillness. Their chaos encounters calm. And something begins to shift. Not in you, but in them. The power of individuation. Jung observed that the unconscious mind always seeks integration. It doesn't care about appearances. It cares about truth. When you begin individuation, when you start facing your wounds and aligning with your deeper self, you activate a force the narcissist cannot control. You stop feeding their need for drama, validation, and conflict. You become psychologically invisible to them, not because you disappear, but because you're no longer playing the role they assigned you. You're no longer the villain, victim, or rescuer. You're just yourself, and that's the one identity they cannot assimilate. This is where real power lies. Not in fighting them, but in outgrowing them. Not in exposing their lies, but in living such solid truth that their distortions cannot touch it. Jung called this the transcendent function, rising above conflict by embracing a higher perspective. When you operate from this place, you're not trapped in their story anymore. You're not even in the same book. What happens when you leave? Here's what happens when you leave with integrity. The narcissist is left alone with the very self they've spent their lifetime running from. No audience, no mirror, no supply, just silence. In that silence, the unconscious begins to speak. Not in words, but in dreams, moods, fleeting moments of doubt. The guilt they've buried, the shame they've projected, the emptiness they've masked with grandiosity. It all starts surfacing. Not because you made them feel guilty, but because the psyche demands balance. Jung called this compensation, the unconscious correcting the one-sidedness of the ego. They may never admit this. They'll probably double down on denial, blame you, rewrite history, or find a new target. But deep within, something has shifted. The person who walked away without begging, without hatred, without needing to win, that person becomes an unresolved image in their mind, a ghost of what could have been, a reflection of what they've lost, not because of you, but because of their own inability to love genuinely, to be real, to be whole. The inner authority. Jung spoke of the self, not the ego, but the totality of who you are, your center of psychological gravity. The self isn't something you create, it's something you discover. It's already there beneath the masks, beneath the roles, beneath even your wounds. When you align with this deeper self, you gain what Jung called inner authority. You no longer need external approval. You no longer feel compelled to control others. You simply are. This is the ultimate threat to the narcissist. Not your anger or rejection, but your inner authority. Lath, because it reveals how hollow their own power really is. They can charm, dominate, manipulate, but they cannot fake authenticity. They can demand loyalty, but cannot inspire it. They can accumulate power, but cannot possess peace. Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." The narcissist is ruled by their unconscious, driven by unacknowledged fears, unprocessed traumas, repressed emotions. They don't make choices. They repeat patterns. They don't relate. They manipulate. They don't love. They consume. But when you make your unconscious conscious, you break the cycle. You become sovereign. And that sovereignty radiates from your presence, in how you speak, listen, set boundaries, without apology. It's in the stillness behind your eyes, the quiet knowing that you are enough, the true haunting. This is what begins to haunt them. Not your absence, but your presence in your own life, in your own truth, in your own power. Somewhere beneath their layers of denial, a question forms. Why didn't they need me? Why didn't they break? Why are they free? That question lingers in quiet moments, when the performance is over, when the next source of validation hasn't arrived. In those gaps, their psyche speaks simply, "You are not whole," and the person who left is. When you walk away in clarity rather than anger, you leave behind more than a memory. You leave behind a mirror they can no longer distort, a truth they can no longer deny, a presence they can no longer control. You don't have to curse them or expose them. You just have to become whole. Do heal, grow, live from your center. Your transformation becomes an eternal question mark in their psyche, a whisper saying, "There was another way, and you chose not to take it." That is the true haunting. Not vengeance or punishment, but the unbearable lightness of someone else's freedom. The realization that you didn't need them to be complete, that you simply outgrew them. Jung said, "I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become." When you live this truth, the most powerful response to psychological abuse isn't fighting, it's transcending, rising so far into your own light that their darkness cannot reach you. And in that transcendence, you stop seeing them as the villain. You see them as a wounded soul, trapped in a prison of their own making. You release them with compassion, reclaiming your energy, peace, and power. This haunts the narcissist not because you hated them, but because you loved yourself enough to leave. Your healing becomes an act of defiance, a declaration of sovereignty, and that truth will echo in their unconscious mind long after you've moved on. Not because you wanted to haunt them, but because authenticity always casts a shadow. In the end, it's not you who haunts them, it's the self they refuse to become. If this resonated with you, consider sharing it with someone who might be experiencing similar challenges. Join our growing community of thoughtful individuals, exploring psychology, consciousness, and personal growth by subscribing to ThinkDeep and enabling notifications. Remember, where you are right now isn't your final chapter. It's the starting point for becoming who you're truly meant to be.